Okay, let's start streaming. Okay, so we're just live here, and hopefully you can hear me. Maybe just comment if you can so that I know I'm not just moving lips. And welcome to everyone who's tuning in right now. I see people from the States, from Europe. I've got Barcelona, Venezuela, South America, uh, Armenia. Someone, it's midnight in Europe and or very late at night, and so I welcome you. Uh, Thank you for being willing to stay up a little bit late to listen to my broadcast. And I'm just tweaking my settings here. I'm using my webcam on my laptop, which is why I'm staring downward intently at my keyboard and just trying to make sure that things are working the way they're supposed to be. Oh, you can hear me. That's great. I've got a neighbor here, Calgary, Alberta. That's about 12 hours from me, so fairly close. uh, and I actually have family in Calgary as well. And yeah, I just want to welcome you here. I think it's really cool that we can do this. It's fun to have you guys here in my studio. And I'm just hanging out right now. I still feel a little bit like I'm getting adjusted to being home after my trip to Denver to Craftsy. And I I had a great time. First of all, it was really cool to film a new course, and that's why I flew out to Denver, Colorado, in late January to film a course with Craftsy. And Craftsy.com is a site that I heard of probably a year or two ago. They have online courses in all kinds of creative fields. And I have a friend who's a member of Craftsy for knitting, and she goes there to get all her knitting patterns, and others who are cake decorators or do different things with baking. There's gardening tutorials, there's jewelry making, and of course for myself, I love the art tutorials. And my daughter and I are taking an acrylic painting course together. She's 11 and loves to paint and draw, and so she and I downloaded a Craftsy course, or rather enrolled in a Craftsy course, and are taking it together. So Craftsy is pretty cool in that they just reach a really wide audience of people who are interested in creative stuff. And so when they approached me and asked me if I would be interested in teaching a course with them, I didn't have to think very long before I said yes. And it was really neat to work with professionals who build courses because, as you know, I've been building my own courses, I've been teaching on YouTube, I've been teaching locally, and this is all stuff that I've kind of taught myself. Anything I know about teaching a workshop, I've either developed on my own or I've learned from going to other artists' workshops. And of course, all different artists have different teaching styles. So it was just neat to work with somebody who does develop courses for a living. That's what they do, and they're very professional about it. And one thing that Craftsy did was they sat down with me via Skype, and we spent many hours developing a script for my course that I was going to be launching on Craftsy. The course is titled Better Sketches with I'm going to say that wrong. Better Paintings with Watercolor Sketches. We had a working title early on, and it changed a little bit. So yeah, but that's the title now. Better Painting with Watercolor Sketches, and the idea is that it parallels very much my own working process. That over the years I've learned that as much as I love to just jump in and start painting, it works the best for me to paint the same subject over and over again. Most of the time, I'm not going to get a great painting the first time I try to paint something. And so I've learned that as much as I would like to pull out a giant sheet of watercolor paper and paint this big, amazing masterpiece on my first try, most of the time that ends up ruining that side of the watercolor paper. And so I've learned to just take it a little bit more slowly, not to hold myself back from having fun painting something, but just to spend a little more time maybe on a smaller piece of paper developing that early idea for my painting and just seeing how it's going to look before I commit myself to a big giant sheet of paper. And sometimes that means I've had to paint something, 7 or 8 times in order to get something that I really feel reflects my true vision for the piece. And so this was what I wanted to present to Craftsy. They had asked me, about my ideas. And I have a watercolor sketches course on my own site, learn.angelafair.com. And it's a great course, but it's not quite the same take on sketching in watercolor that I'll be doing with Craftsy. The watercolor sketches course on my site is more about warm-ups and exercises to strengthen your painting. It's not about developing one particular painting from start to finish. And the Craftsy course is 6 lessons, and each one is focused on the same reference photo and just making that reference photo, developing it better. So thinking about value, thinking about line and color, and all this stuff that sounds like homework and sounds like research. But I've found a way for myself that feels like play, and it's a lot of fun to develop a painting. And even thinking about these complicated, technical things like value and color and line and focal point and composition. And I'm thinking about all of that stuff, but I'm doing it in a fun and experimental and expressive way. And so I find that really enjoyable. And I liked being able to really share so many of my light bulb moments with Craftsy. After we developed our script, they flew me down to Denver, and I was there for 3 days filming. First day was rehearsal day, and I needed it because it's my first time having 4 cameras on me while I'm teaching. Most of the time I'm just running one camera by myself and not having feedback from anyone else on how the course is going. So I had professionals there to set up the cameras. All I had to do was just show up and look pretty and develop the script and do the painting. And I worked together really well with the production team. They were some great guys. And like I said, at rehearsal day, we just kind of got used to the cameras. I talked through several of the lessons, and then the very next day we started filming, and we filmed half the lessons on the first day and then the other 3 on the second day, and things went really smoothly. It was I could see how all that script development, all the practice I'd done at home and the dry runs of trying to work through the script and paint the scene as I describe it, all of that stuff came together for those videos really smoothly, and all that preparation does pay off. It's a lot of work, but I think you'll really see, if you take the Craftsy course, I think you'll really see how polished it is and how much information we were able to pack into those 6 lessons. Just because of the way we'd planned and prepared. We trimmed off anything that wasn't going to be useful or helpful to you, and we just focused on really building a course that was really just jam-packed with information. It was funny as I spoke on camera, and I was just thinking as I would relay the information on my script, everything that I developed and written down, and I was thinking, I remember when I learned this, and I remember the light bulb moment that I had when I realized why I was doing what I was doing, and when I realized, what I shouldn't be doing. And so it was really cool to share all of that and think about the years of practice and study and just, all those brush miles that I logged in order to really learn this stuff. And sometimes I feel like I can learn everything the hard way, and then I'm teaching you, and maybe that'll make your journey a little bit easier, so you won't have to take as long to learn some of the watercolor techniques that I did. So I'm just going to flip over to the chat window and see if you guys have any questions. And I see someone, Carrie says, very reassuring to know you struggle with the big giant sheet of paper. And yes, I love painting on a big piece of paper, but it's so easy to just ruin one of those. I see a few people saying the stream is a little jumpy. I don't have a lot of control on that, so hopefully the streaming will improve here. And let's see here. And welcome again, everybody. I see more people tuning in from Canada. I have a neighbor here from my own hometown in Dawson Creek. Hi, Christine. And another from the UK. I know it's late there for you guys as well in the evening. Midnight in Pakistan. And I've just been reading a book about Pakistan, actually. I love to read. If you have recommendations for a favorite book, I'd love to hear it. I have a question. How much is the craftsy.com course? I'm actually not sure about that, Patty. I haven't set the prices, so that's kind of up to Craftsy. I can tell you that when the course launches on the 15th, I will be offering a promotional discount. I think probably just for the first day or two. So make sure you keep your eyes peeled and watch for that. If you're on my mailing list, I will be sending out an email to let everybody know. Oh, hi, Dad. uh, Thanks for tuning in for a moment. And my family has put up with my many years of obsession with watercolor, and you'll see my paintings in their homes if you socialize with them. And my mother still has one of my very first paintings from my first year of painting. I would love to steal it and replace it with something better, but you know, she's sentimentally attached, just like a good mother should be. So I guess I'll have to put up with seeing that very awkward first floral that I did many years ago. I'm going to be switching over to a different camera in a moment if I can make all the technical stuff work. And then I'll be showing a tip for you guys. I know you don't want to just see my smiling face the whole time here. So plus my throat will start to get sore if I'm just babbling on. So I do want to talk a little bit about, like I said, I was going to share a tip that I haven't that it didn't make it into the Craftsy course. And when I was thinking about some of the stuff we trimmed off, we really didn't trim off a lot of information. We really packed it in there, and that was our goal. But one thing that I didn't end up mentioning was just spending a little bit of time talking about the layers of transparent watercolor. And a lot of times with Craftsy, well, I should say when I'm teaching my beginner courses or any of my courses, I do kind of assume there's some basic watercolor knowledge there. And because I assume that you have, you know, maybe gone over some of the basic techniques, I don't talk a lot about the why and how of watercolor and how it's different from maybe oils or acrylics. But one of the biggest differences between watercolor and any other medium, or most other mediums, is that it's transparent. And I love transparent watercolor, and I've said this many times, because of the way you can layer those colors and get that beautiful translucency. And it also means you have to be careful in your approach. And that's what makes it hard for people to adapt when you switch from like acrylic or oil. It can be difficult because you're often painting from light to dark. And the reason we paint from light to dark is I like to imagine you're painting, maybe instead of painting, you're working with glass. Say you have a dark colored piece of glass and a light colored piece of glass. Well, you can't very well take that dark piece of glass and put the light colored piece of glass over it and see the light piece of glass. It just vanishes because the dark glass shines through the light glass. The light glass turns out all but invisible, doesn't it? So with watercolor, it's the same thing. You have a pale yellow hue, you're not going to want to be able to paint that over a rich dark violet. It's just going to kind of fade away into nothing. So with watercolor, and I know if you've painted in watercolor at all, you already know this, but again, it's just a matter of simplifying these techniques and really thinking about the why. We paint from light to dark because we want to use that transparency, and we want to use the strengths of transparency and not the weaknesses. So again, not layering light over dark, but dark can go over light very easily. And we see that very much in negative painting. I am going to go back to you guys' questions in a few minutes right after my painting demonstration wraps up. So feel free to keep asking them, and I will scroll through the chat to try to answer everyone's questions. But right now I'm going to switch my camera over and we're going to talk a little bit about negative painting. I touch on it in the Craftsy course, but I don't go I don't go too deep into it. So let's just switch cameras. I'm going to, hopefully I can make that work. And then we'll talk some about negative painting. Oh. Hey, I think that might have worked. Okay, so I'm just going to move over, take my microphone with me. And hopefully what you're seeing right now is this pale blue watercolor paper. Yes, and a little corner of my palette. And you can see I've basically got an assortment of kind of pale blue lines right now. And what I'm trying to paint here, and I've thought about this many times, is how do I paint a forest of trees? We've got maybe lighter trees in the front, the trees get darker in the back, and then we have sky showing through. So I've just prepped my surface because I didn't want to wait too long for things to dry. And I've spritzed my palette with water, which is what I always do to just kind of revive the colors. Some of them are drying a little bit. There we go. And I've painted this underlayer of kind of a pale gray and then also the blue for where I want the areas of sky to show through. So you can see that. And you can see a few lines here as well. Like here you can see this looks to me like a tree trunk. This can be one of our large trees in the front. And because our trees are lighter in the front, they'll go darker as we come away from the viewer. So the second row of trees is going to be slightly darker than this tree. The row after that's going to be slightly darker yet. So it's a perfect time to use negative painting. And negative painting, again, it really just means painting around your objects. Rather than painting the object itself, you're painting around it. And we have to do that anytime we want to leave something lighter than the objects that are surrounding it. So one thing you see here in the corner is my palettes, and you can see the corner of 3 palettes here. And I have 4 palettes stacked here because I love color, and I do not use all these colors in my paintings. So I'm just going to actually move 3 of these out of the way right now. Most of the time what I do is I'll pick and choose my favorite colors for a particular painting, and I might only use 6 or 8 or 10 of those colors out of the 40 or so that are in my 4 different palettes. So just because you see all those colors there doesn't mean they're all going into one painting. And for the aspen trees that I'm going to do, and I think I have a photo. This is not a great photo, but it does give you an idea of what the tree type I'm painting is. The aspen trees have a long straight trunk. A lot of the branches are kind of just up at the top. So we really aren't going to see a lot of branches if I'm painting just a cross section of tree trunks. And the trees I want to paint are going to be closer together. So that's just a little example of what I'm going to be doing. And I'm going to use a gray. And I like to make a really nice gray by mixing cobalt blue with burnt umber. And if you have a little more burnt umber than blue, let's see here, scrap paper to show you, it'll be kind of a brownish, a warm gray. And if you have a little more blue than burnt umber, it'll be a cool blue gray. So it's a really nice gray. And I'm just going to paint my second row of trees, but I'm not just going to paint the second row of trees right now. I'm actually going to also paint the third and fourth rows. And that's the idea with negative painting, is I'm going to paint, well, actually I'm going to paint around my first row of trees first. Getting ahead of myself here, because I have this first layer down already. And I want to be careful not to get too dark. So you can see this gray that I put down is quite dark right now. So I can just add a little water and let that color spread. And because I'm adding water instead of adding paint, my gray is getting lighter. I'm able to spread it out and get it to the tone that I want, the value that I need for my second layer. If I make my second row of trees too dark and go too dark too soon, then I'm going to be in trouble, aren't I? And it's sometimes just easier to turn your board. That's one reason I tape my paper down. I'm using indigo art paper. This is a 140-pound cold press, and the size is 8 by 10. And the brush I'm using is a Princeton 4950. That's the model number, and it's a number 16 round. So you can see I'm just painting around this big tree right here. That's going to be in the front. And hopefully I've made enough of this gray to fill my whole page over here in my palette. But if I haven't, what I can do is if I start to feel like I'm running low, I can dip into it. I can add a little more blue and a little more brown as I paint. And if I'm topping up as I'm painting rather than waiting to mix that color again as after I run out, I'm going to be more likely to keep some consistency in my colors because I'm just always adding and changing it slightly rather than adding a whole new fresh color at the very end. Now, because my very first row of trees is in the front, I don't have to worry about just painting part of the tree. It's a whole tree. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but you see I have a solid trunk here. Later on I might have the trees that are in behind other trees are going to be you're going to just see the edge of one here and the edge of one there. And so that can get difficult if you're not negative painting. But I actually think this is going to be simplified because we're just painting right now all of the trees. We're painting the second row of trees and everything behind it. And as we paint, we're going to just keep layering more color. Okay, so here you can see another tree, full-size tree. And I'm going to put another one right here. So now I'm going to turn again just so I can make I can pull my brush right along the edge and that gives me a nice smooth line. And then I fill the rest in. Now I'm left-handed, so I should really be working from the right to the left because my risk is now I'm going to put my hand in the paint. But I don't know. I think I can probably avoid it since I'm not doing really detailed work right now. Topping up my mixture again, I'm going to add a little more blue. And I'm going to so I've got one tree in the front, two trees in the front. Here's a third tree. I think I'm going to put another one, maybe a skinny one here. See, I didn't paint the tree itself just now, I just painted around it. And it's way skinnier at the bottom than at the top, so I'm going to just adjust its size. Most of the time a tree is going to be thinner at the top, just depending on, I guess, what variety of tree you're talking about. And maybe one more over here. You'll notice too, this is a brush handling tip, that when you are painting an object, use your brush to follow the shape of that object. I'm not going back and forth to fill in this area. I'm going straight up and down, just the same way tree trunks go, using brush strokes, because even though the paint is wet and the colors blend together, it's just a good idea to make a habit of following the contours of your shapes as you paint. Okay, I'm going to refine that a little bit too. Okay, so here we have two rows of trees basically right now. We have our very lightest trees, there's 5 there if you can see them, and then we have a background that's slightly darker gray where we're going to start to pull out our second row of trees and then the rows after that. Just give it a second to dry a little bit here, and I'm just going to check in and make sure my video is still working. It's hard to paint and monitor video health at the same time. Okay, while we're waiting for things to dry just a little bit here, I've got a couple questions I can answer. I see Carrie asking, how long did it take me to go from beginner to feeling that I'm an accomplished artist that can put my vision on the paper as I like, and in a way that only I can? And that's a great question. I'm not sure. I mean, I think every artist will realize as you paint, you'll never really feel like you've completely reached the pinnacle of what you can do. I'm always trying to ask myself, what if, and experiment. A few years, I hate to give a number. I like to think that I was painting. I feel like every year that I painted, I felt like I got better. And so, after painting for a year, I was really happy with where I was. I think it was a year or two before I started putting art in the art gallery in our community and really starting to put my art out in the public eye a little bit. And yet it was 18 years before I realized that I felt really at home with watercolors. And I say 18 years, but there's a lot of time in there where I wasn't painting a lot. So don't listen to me and go, oh no, it's going to take me 18 years to feel like I'm a good painter. That's terrible. There comes a stage as you practice that you start to make the different techniques your own. And so when you start to get comfortable with each of your techniques, then you get to free up your mind to think about creativity and self-expression, and start thinking about what makes my way of putting it is what makes my soul resonate when I'm painting. Sometimes I'm painting. I have a little expressive piece that I've been working on over here, and stuff like this, playing with color, it makes my heart sing, and I get to pull out something and just dabble with color and interesting little brush strokes and see these little moments that happen on the paper. And I'm always looking for those heart-singing moments in my paintings and always trying to find a way to create more of them. And so I like to challenge myself with every painting. It is pretty cool to start feeling comfortable with watercolor and comfortable enough that you can start to really make those creative decisions. And I promise that it can happen for anyone. Mastering technique is a skill that you can achieve with practice. None of us ever, I like to think of it in terms of teaching your child to write his name. Well, my son may have said, I'm never going to learn how to write my name and get my letters formed correctly. I had every confidence that that was a skill he could master. When he was first learning to hold a pencil and spell, it didn't feel natural, and it didn't feel like it was something he was going to be able to achieve. But skills are like that. If you have the dedication, you can learn them. And then once you've learned them, you can start to think about creativity and what makes your heart just go pity-pat when you're painting. Another question. Just different things about my favorite materials. I do have a supply list on my website, and I can share that. Most of the time I'm ordering my pigments from Daniel Smith. I'm really enjoying Daniel Smith's paint. They have so many great color combinations. And I also use Watercolor by Core. That's spelled Q-O-R, and that's made by Golden. And their watercolors have an amazing vibrance. The different palettes I have, mostly they're just filled up in whatever order I happen to buy the watercolor paint. I don't have a very scientific method for figuring out how I fill my palette. Other questions? Opinions about mixing your own colors other than buying the colors you want. I love mixing color in watercolor. And yet at the same time, I like buying color, like I said, from Daniel Smith. And a lot of their pigments are actually two base pigments put together, or sometimes more. Their blue over here, this Verditer blue, is a combination of, I'm probably going to get it wrong, I think it's cobalt blue and cerulean with a little zinc white. And so it is two pure pigments put together, or three. And yet, I like having it in my palette because of what it does on the paper, and it does save me a little bit of time. And yet at the same time, I love mixing Verditer blue with other colors, and mixing it with a violet, or mixing it with the different shades of blue. So just because you have pre-mixed pigments doesn't mean you're not going to end up mixing stuff on your own. And when I was first painting, I relied more heavily on pure pigment than I do now. I'm a lot more willing to mix my colors now than I used to be. And that's just because I've used my pigments so many times. I know what colors work well together, and that helps me make decisions for what I'm going to mix together for my paintings. And as you can see, I'll pull it out again. you know, when you have something like this, you can really start to see how colors interact with each other, how this yellow interacts with this magenta, how the green and yellows respond to each other. And so it starts to give me, even if something like this is just a warm-up that I do before I start painting, it really gives me ideas for how I'm going to mix my colors for a more serious painting or a more focused piece that I do. I have a question. Did I get any professional training or college experience? Outside of a few courses and workshops I've taken over my 20 years of painting, I really am self-taught. I hate the word self-taught because I find a lot of artists will use it to describe themselves almost exclusively. And sometimes I feel like that's kind of self-deprecating, like maybe we should think of self-taught artists as having something a little less than someone who's been educated in a college or university. And I disagree with that. I think technical skill has to come through practice and time in the studio. So wherever you are learning, wherever your information is coming from, the only way to apply it is with dedicated time in the studio. So that's really important. And so I don't talk a lot about whether I'm self-taught or not, because I just don't think it's that important. I take my learning where I can get it. And certainly if I'd had more opportunities to study art in a more formal setting, I probably would have taken them. But just for me, it was always more convenient to just go out to the studio and do my best with whatever I had. And I feel like I really learned a lot that way, and I could really own what I learned as, belonging to me and applying to what I wanted to learn in watercolor. Okay, we're going to move on. I wanted just to give everything a little chance to dry here. And, whoops, I lost my video page. There we go. I see a little creative. You have a great question. I'm gonna come to you in a minute because I do have some. I have a great offer for any beginner painters out there that I'm gonna give you guys towards the end of the broadcast. So we'll get there in a minute. Okay, third layer. So we're talking about negative painting, and now we need to get back to developing these trees a little more. Obviously, right now we just have the bare bones, just the trunks. And if I want to add detail to my trees, I would save that for the end. And things are still a little bit damp. So if I was painting this without a video camera, I'd probably let it dry a little further. But I don't want to keep you guys waiting all day or all night. So let's just move right on. So our next move is to think about our second row of trees. So the second nearest trees to our viewer, or to the front of our painting, however you want to think about it. And these trees could be right behind these bigger trunks. They could be, kind of more off in the middle or the side. And the trees behind them are going to be slightly darker than them yet. So right here I have a very pale tree trunk, maybe that one. And they're also going to be, the other thing is they're also going to be a little bit bigger than the trees that are further away. So, or at least some of them. So we got to start planning where they're going to come from and what they're going to look like. So maybe we have, let's see here, I'm going to do one. I also have to think about my sky gaps, and I'm not going to think about them too hard, but I'm just going to paint around my second row of trees. So because we're painting around it, I need to think about leaving those lines. So say we have a tree right here, and he's kind of a crooked, skinny guy. As you can see, and he goes in behind this first tree trunk. My paper's gotten kind of lumpy on this side. I have taped it down, but taped down paper still does buckle a bit. And what I'll do is, if it's still ripply after it's completely dried, I might iron it with a warm iron and a light steam setting. And I would do that face down with paper towel in between so I don't accidentally smudge any colors. But you can iron it just to smooth it out. It does work. Just be careful to do it on a clean surface. And have some paper towel or cloth to give you that space to keep things from, don't put your iron directly on the paper. It's not always easy to talk and paint at the same time, guys. Okay, so I'm doing another, especially with negative painting, it takes a part of my brain that isn't always easily accessible. Okay, so we're painting around our second row of trees. There don't have to be a ton of them. And if I was looking directly at a reference photo, I wouldn't feel like I needed to paint every tree I could see in my reference photo. Sometimes we become a slave to our reference photo, and really what we need to be doing is thinking more in terms of simplifying what we see. Okay, so here we have this lighter tree here. We're going to paint right around it, right there. And maybe we'll put one skinny guy here. Remember, I'm not painting the trees, I'm painting what's behind the trees. The trees behind the other trees. So, I'm really trying not to get too dark. Do you see those depths starting to come out? You see I'm painting on a towel now, and that's not something I used to do, but it sure saves me from wasting too much paper towel, because I can blot my brush on my towel instead. Throw it in the wash when I'm done. I'm just using my brush to lift some of this color slightly darker than I like, so my brush can work as a sponge and lift that color. There we go. That's looking a little bit more like I like. So are you seeing the depth starting to come out? And I can just keep moving across my page and do that. And I don't know about you guys, I'm not in a hurry, so I'm gonna do it. We won't skip it, we'll just keep going. And the other nice thing is going slightly darker up against these tree trunks as well, just is going to make them pop just a little bit more, create a little more contrast. It's going to draw the eye right to the biggest trees. And I better remind myself again, Angela, you are painting the trees behind the trees. You're not painting the trees themselves, so that means these shapes can still be fairly wide. And you'll find with negative painting, it's like that. You'll be painting away, and then all of a sudden you realize that your brain jumped the tracks and you're painting objects again instead of painting around objects. So I have a few things in the description of this video you're going to want to check out after the broadcast wraps up. One is a link to my Craftsy course, and while the course has not launched yet, you can enter to win it by signing up on Craftsy. So you'll want to grab that link, just click it and head over to Craftsy to be entered to win. And on the 15th, I will be notifying the winner. Craftsy picks a winner and it lets me know, and then I'll send an email congratulating you and giving you a free access code, whoever happens to win that. And I think Craftsy would be really excited if they were to see just a ton of people from my site sign up. That would really help them know that they picked a good instructor to work with, somebody who has lots of friends in the watercolor world. And then as well, I will be offering that promotional rate when the Craftsy course launches on February 15th. In addition to that, like I said, Craftsy does have me in the course. I am giving a fair bit of beginner tips, but a lot of it is just stuff I'm just touching on briefly as I'm painting. So if you want more in-depth instruction on beginner techniques and how to make those watercolor decisions, how to use those techniques to make your paintings better, I really encourage you to check out my two of my beginner courses. One of those is Basic Techniques in Watercolor on my website, learn.angelafair.com, and the other one is my Loose and Fluid 1 course. And in Loose and Fluid 1, I cover a lot of the same basic techniques as in my Basic Techniques course, but I'm talking more in depth about how to apply and use them. So both of those courses I've actually bundled together, so you can save 20% when you buy the bundle rather than buying those courses individually. And I actually have a link in the description of this video giving you an additional 20% off. So that's actually 40% off those two courses if you are interested in purchasing those before the Craftsy course launch. And that coupon will be valid until the Craftsy course launches on February 15th. So you can get the handle on those beginner techniques before you start the Craftsy course. Okay. So that's row number 3. So we've got this first row of trees. The second row of trees is slightly darker, and I've painted behind those trees. So row 3 is kind of suggested as well. So you can really start to see some depth happening there. What do you think? It's always easier to tell what's going on when there's a little bit of detail. And so what I'll do is, as we're waiting for the background, this third layer of paint to dry, is let's start putting some detail into our trees. And I love painting aspen and birch trees because they have such great contrast. They've got these amazing dark scars on their trunks. And that gives you some really great color. And yeah, if you get up close, you can see even more awesome colors. So let's just, I have someone saying the link to win enrollment is not working. I will check that as soon as this course is, as soon as the webinar is done here, and make sure that it's working. It should take you right to Craftsy, but if I didn't enter it right, that could be a problem. So I will check on it. Yes, negative painting can make the brain hurt. I have another comment. Thanks for your demo on negative painting. This technique is challenging you. It's very hard not to lose your place in the layers. So just reminding myself that I'm not painting the tree, I'm painting the trees behind the trees. It really is helpful to me, and I should mention I have been working on figuring out this whole negative painting thing for a very long time. So if you're finding it hard to kind of wrap your brain around, don't despair. Just keep trying to, do a little practice now and then, and just try to remind yourself of those different principles, and it will come together eventually, but I promise. Okay, so I'm just going to give some contrast to my tree, and I've got a very dark violet right there mixed with a little blue, and I'm immediately just going to soften that color out with some clear water. I want to give my trees a bit of a rounded shape, and that roundedness is really a lot easier to create if you just kind of do this transition of value from light to dark. So that's dark shadow softening out to give that rounded look. And then a little bit of those dark scars maybe. And because my paint is, now my tree trunk is wet in most places, that color is going to bleed. So that's pretty nice looking, isn't it? I don't want to go too dark because then my tree is going to blend into the background. So we'll just tweak what we have here. Using my brush to move some of those colors around. Give it a chance to dry a little bit as well. I have a new shade of blue that I really love from Daniel Smith. It's called Soda Light Blue Genuine. And it's so delightful. That was a really terrible pun there. But, and I just accidentally grabbed some green, so oops. But the Soda Light Genuine is kind of like a really dark blue. It has a tiny bit of black in it, and it granulates beautifully. So you get this gorgeous blue-black when you're painting with it. So it's a real pleasure to use. My only problem is it doesn't always dry as dark as I would like it to. I will try to do, I always think of these things as I'm recording, but I will try to go into the description after and give you guys some more details on colors I've used and links to suppliers if you're interested in that. and I know you are. So yeah, there's my tree, just a little bit more. You can see how adding some of those details starts to make it really kind of pop a little bit. Let's do the same to this tree trunk here, just for fun. I'm not going to finish this painting today. If you guys think I'm an expert at finishing a painting in an hour, you are sadly mistaken. Sometimes I might have an hour of painting time into a painting, but that does not mean it was all in one sitting. Usually there has to be some drying time, some pondering time, some making a mistake and blotting it up quickly time. Really don't discount the amount of value that goes in, just the benefit of spending time thinking about your painting and planning what to do next. Just because you had to set something aside and take a break because you weren't sure what to do doesn't mean you're not still thinking about it, planning what to do, and just kind of regrouping so that you can come back to it with some real direction and understanding of what to do next. And if you're like me and follow these different watercolor artists on Facebook, there's some really great watercolor groups on Facebook and individual artists that are really great to learn from. And you can see how they tackle their different watercolor issues and learn something that might help you with a particularly puzzling painting problem. And there we go, a little more darks. Isn't that just fun? I've got this combination between there's little bits of the tree trunk here that are dry, some portions that are wet, so I'm having a little balance, a little push and pull between crisp lines, dry on dry, and those different soft or wet effects. Very pretty. And I'm going to just use that very dark Sodalite Genuine and put some dark marks here. And I'm doing them quite juicy because I'm going to go back in just a second and smudge them around a little bit. Okay, so you can see they're very stark and crisp, and some people like that. I tend to be a little bit more leaning towards soft and blurry edges, so go in with the damp brush and just add a little moisture, let things run, and then maybe go back in yet again with a spongy brush. I've blotted out most of the water so that now the brush will actually attract moisture and lift moisture right off the page, and that gives me another little element of control over my painting. I'm going to dot in a little bit of cobalt violet. It's one of my favorite colors. And at first I didn't like it at all because it's kind of weak. It's not bold and powerful, but it has this beautiful soft pinky violet hue, and it does really beautiful texture things too in a wet wash. Okay, so there's another tree trunk. I feel like this tree trunk needs maybe a darker tree behind it to really make it come forward and pop against the background. And I can do that, you know, in my negative painting in my next layer. Okay, let's do one more dark layer, and then I'm going to wrap this up. We're at 48 minutes already, guys. That time just flies. So for this next layer of trees, they're a little further away yet, so they're going to be a little bit darker. And I'm going to add some Sodalite Blue to my background layer just for fun, because like I said, it is a little bit of an addiction of mine, this color, with my cobalt blue and my burnt umber. I wouldn't go so far as to depart completely from the colors I've been using so far. Just, you know, I've been using cobalt blue and burnt umber for my background. I'm not going to now clean my palette and use something else, but there's nothing wrong with adding another color as you paint and just, you know, pumping up that mixture with something a little bit different. This is still quite damp. It's going to probably give me a blurry line, which is not going to be the most beautiful thing in the world, but that's all right. So again, I'm painting the trees behind the trees. So we're going to define another row of trees. Starting to lose my voice too. So one thing I'm doing with negative painting, I'm not doing with negative painting, is I'm not painting over anything that I've painted around. So these lighter colors of trees, they don't get painted over. I'm only painting over the last layer that I painted, which is that darker one. So that keeps it simpler for me. That answers a question of what I should or shouldn't paint. I don't paint anything that's lighter than the last layer I did. So, you know, this tree here, I'm not going to touch it with a brush. It gets to be left alone now. And anything that's not then a tree in my next row is going to get painted, or any dark tone that's not a tree. So all of this dark color either becomes tree or gets painted over this stage. So I am seeing a few mistakes where I could have maybe planned my trees a little bit better, but for the most part this method has worked really quite smoothly. And trees are generally, I mean, forests, they're often a tangled mess. We've got all different angles leaning against other angles. So, you know, you can have a little bit of tangly confusion in your background. That won't hurt anything. Maybe something over here. And actually things aren't bleeding too badly, even though I didn't wait as long as I ordinarily would have for things to dry. So that's good news. The other thing I would do, and we're not going to have time to do it on video today, but just like I added detail to this first row of trees, I would do the same for the second and maybe even some of the third row of trees, just making sure to have less detail. The things we want to be in our focal point, and I really talk about this in the Craftsy course. Everything, your focal point should stand out because it's got maybe the most detail, or it's the largest size, or it's the darkest or lightest color. All of those things can help your focal point to stand out. So you want to use that to your advantage. You wouldn't do something that you didn't want. If you want people to focus on an object, you're going to paint a lot of detail there. And if you don't want them to look at it, you're going to, use less detail or make it, less conspicuous in your painting. So, okay, so now we're really starting to feel some depths here in our trees. I think there's a lot more I could do to just finish this off, of course, with detail, starting to maybe create some branches and stuff to really give us some more shapes going on and some more movement in the piece instead of everything just being straight up and down. And so I'm going to work on this in my studio off camera after the broadcast, and in a few days I'll be able to post the finished piece for you guys to see. And thanks for painting and watching along with me. Hopefully this helped you figure out or understand negative painting just a little bit more. I've chosen a really complex subject here, and so hopefully the way I've presented it will simplify it a little bit in your mind, but don't be surprised if when you go to try to paint something like this, you end up getting all turned around again. That happens to me too. I'm going to switch my camera angles again, seeing as it worked. Whoops. Seeing as it worked so well the first time, and then I'll just quickly look through your questions and answer a few more questions in the last few minutes of the broadcast. Okay, there we go. So yeah, we're just going to wrap up the broadcast with a few questions. Please do take the time to check into the video description in the next 5 or 10 minutes after the broadcast. I will make sure to update it with correct links to everything I've mentioned and any kind of guidance or videos that will help you in your own painting. Yeah, just saying hi to everybody. And yeah, again, thanks for tuning in. I'm just going to look quickly through your questions here. Okay, here we go. I think this is about as far as I went. I have a little creative says, I love the style and loose feeling of Jean Haines' work. I'm a beginner and want to learn techniques, but I'm struggling and I learn best through video. What do you recommend? It's like you're asking me to advertise myself. I do teach online at learn.angelafair.com, so if you can't wait for the Craftsy course to launch, I do recommend you check me out there. I have a free course on that site, as well as my basic techniques bundle, which is my basic techniques and my loose and fluid 1 course. And they're both really geared for beginners and geared in painting in a loose and fluid way. I can tell you that the more you paint, the easier it is to be expressive and loose in watercolor. For a while, I felt like maybe I shouldn't be teaching a loose technique to beginner artists because learning technique is so important to self-expression. And yet at the same time, I think you don't have to be like a rigid, realistic painter at the beginning of your painting career and then loosen up as you go. Why wouldn't you want to start loose if you can? So I try to teach, in the different techniques and just how I apply them and do decision making in my painting. And that's how I try to approach all my courses. My goal for every one of my students is that you learn the techniques so you can express yourself. You don't need to paint just like me. The idea is to find a balance between maybe what you're seeing in your reference photo and what really makes your heart sing, or what's really loose or whatever. But the idea is you have something to say inside yourself and you want to be able to say that with watercolor, then I want to give you the tools to do that. And so that's my goal in all my courses is let's find your style and to give you the tools so that you can use the techniques to express your own style. I do have a question, where do I stand on heat guns and hair dryers for watercolor? I like to leave my paintings to dry on their own because I call that my thinking time. And I've also found that when I have used a heat gun or a blow dryer, sometimes it can cause the paint to dry in a not very pretty way. I don't know if the paint sinks into the paper faster or doesn't sink in enough, maybe is more the issue. So I really like to let things dry naturally. I think you get a more organic, fluid mixture of color. And I'm just looking at my painting and thinking about it here. And while it's drying, I get to think and plan what I'm going to do next. And sometimes that means I might paint on something for only 5 minutes and then set it aside to dry and then work on something else. So, I'm always just trying different, I'm trying to always be busy painting, but that doesn't mean I'm busy painting the same thing nonstop. Mary asks about the reference photo for the Craftsy course. It's a beautiful mountain scene, and I actually talk about how to choose a good reference photo in the Craftsy course. So you'll be able to see the reference photo. I don't have it. I haven't made it available myself. So but it is on the Craftsy course. Moving on. Okay, I have another couple people saying the link's not working, so I will check on that, the Craftsy entry link, because you do want to enter to win if you can. I have a question about painting on watercolor paper blocks. The paper blocks are awesome because they're already glued down on all four sides. My issue is just they seem to be a lot more expensive, and I like to be able to paint in different sizes than just what would come in a block. So I usually buy the loose sheets of watercolor paper and cut it down to work with. But if the blocks are great paper usually. Do I ever work on heavier 300-pound paper or rough textured paper? Most of the time I paint on a cold press 300-pound paper. So if, yeah, I find the 140-pound is actually just a little thinner than I like. So I really love the 300-pound, and most of the time I'm using that. Questions? I love Mind of Watercolor too, Diane. Steve is a great guy and an excellent artist and teacher. So you can, yeah, anyone who's interested in more watercolor stuff, you can check out Steve's channel, The Mind of Watercolor. I have a question about using a limited palette. Which 5 colors would I suggest? Offhand, I would think maybe alizarin crimson for a red. That's a cool red. You also want a warm red, like a cadmium red, that has like a little more of an orangey tone. So 2 reds, cobalt blue or ultramarine blue. I like green for a sap green, although you can mix green with blue and yellow. And for a yellow, maybe Nicolai's yellow or New Gamboge. And I love having a dark color as well, Crystal Maiden. I think the Payne's Gray is really great if you don't have, or the Sodalite Blue. I have another question. Do I ever do preliminary sketches? I don't like drawing. That's my deep, dark, and dirty secret is I don't really like drawing, so I don't sketch. I like to draw with my brush instead. So I tend to start out by just sketching, by painting something loosely. Maybe once, maybe twice, maybe 3 or 4 times, and we'll go over that in the Craftsy course as well. I actually do pull out a pencil in my Craftsy course. It's not my favorite thing, so we spend about 2 minutes in the whole course using pencil. Thanks for joining in, you guys. Just taking a look here. I think I've hit all the questions, and yeah, I appreciate you guys being here. Oh, one more question, 2 more questions. Do I ever worry about fugitive colors? I don't. I tend to not think about them at all, actually. There was a time when I avoided Opera Rose because I heard it was, or Opera Pink, because I heard it was fugitive. I don't worry about it anymore. It's a beautiful color, and the paintings I have painted with Opera Pink are still lovely several years down the road. So I try not to worry about it too much. I just try to use what I like and leave it at that. I know all our ancient, 100-year-old watercolor artists, some of the colors in their beautiful paintings have faded and some have not, and their paintings are still beautiful, so I really don't worry about it. What other painters do I admire or look to for inspiration? So many. I love Jean Haynes. I'm going to her workshop in March, and I'm really excited about that. I love... My mind always goes blank when I'm asked a question like this. I have a beautiful book by Kees van Alst on realistic abstracts that I love. In my news feed, I follow many amazing artists. Thomas Schaller's very good. David Rankin, I have to mention him because he's an amazing watercolor teacher as well. And if you look him up on Facebook, you can see him describe his process for painting. And a lot of what I know about value in painting, I've learned from David Rankin. More questions? Can you enter the Craftsy class giveaway more than once? I think you can just enter it once. As for practice exercises, I recommend for loose painting. In my watercolor sketches course on learn.angelafair.com, I have a whole bunch. Really, I just like starting out by playing with color every day, using lots of water, mixing different colors. And okay, so I'm going to wrap this up. We are over an hour now. I've had a great time, you guys. I'm going to go have a big, long drink and rehydrate myself. And yeah, just thanks for checking in. Do check back in a few days. Hopefully I'll have wrapped up this tree painting. or ruined it entirely. There's always that risk. And and I will also get to work right away and make sure all my links in the description are up to date so that you guys can take a look at my favorite supplies. Check out my course promotion. You can get 40% off my beginner bundle from now until February 15th. So you'll want to check that out. Regularly, it's just 20% off. So 40% off is a fantastic deal. And yeah, just have a great day. I hope that just what you guys learned from me is that I love painting, and that's what I want you guys to feel too. Don't feel guilty about not being able to paint what you want. Don't feel guilty about not being able to paint as often as you want. Don't feel like you're doing everything wrong. The more you paint, the better you will get, whether you're doing it right or not. And that's what I've learned. That's what I guess that's a big lesson for a self-taught artist is, hey, there's no wrong way. It's just love it, do it, and you're just going to improve at it. So have a great day. Bye, everybody.